I think the digital enterprise means different things to different people. There are some companies where it comes naturally to them because they are internet-facing and hyperscale, web-scale by their very nature. People like I've mentioned before, people like Facebook and eBay and others, right? So we know who those big brand names are that now dominate that space. We know other upstart companies. I say upstart, now very successful, but certainly Google, but now Uber and Airbnb and Tesla, who are entirely based upon digital disintermediation, digital disruption of the industries that they serve. And I think that most organizations need to ask themselves, where internally can they Uberize themselves, right? Where can they disrupt what they're now doing to become far more customer-facing, far more external, looking at their business from the outside rather than from the inside. It's not like there's a magic bullet, and it's not like industries are going to transform themselves overnight, but they need to be looking at and picking projects that they can take on to begin to think in the new way of what it is to look from the outside in. So we thought of the data center as being primarily a computing resource. And I'm here to suggest that in the modern digital era, it is really a network center, not a data center. As we move to the network edge, to the IP, interconnect, exchange edge, where content delivery, meaning streaming video particularly, interactivity, gaming, the sensing, the receiving of sensing information from things like smart cities, things like that feed through the Internet of Things, that kind of big bucket that we put everything into. The big data that is collected by that and the analytics that go with it, other things that may seem smaller, but things like robotics, all of these are data driven, and all of these are network driven, meaning it is the quality of the network that ultimately will determine the success of the venture. So I see the network in the future. I mean, let's face it, we're now in the era of the zettabyte. We hadn't even, by the year 2000, we hadn't even reached 1 zettabyte. Now we're somewhere in the realm of 4.4, and we will be at 44 to 50 zettabytes of information transacted over the world's networks by the end of this decade. That is transformational change in the world. Facebook would now be, by population, the largest country in the world, if it were a country, and it's done that in 10 years. So we're in a time where the network really does rule what the data center is and how we define it. The history of the data center is that it has been ruled for many, many years by the requirements of the critical facility, and those are primarily mechanical and electrical, power and power management, and everything that relates to that, and then cooling, thermal management of electronics inside the data center. These are factories. One of the things that we have, for years, we have seen data centers as being these palaces of technology, when in fact we're moving very rapidly toward the time when they are truly commoditized and industrialized and routinized, if you will, so that the kind of server that sits in the computer rack, the kind of storage device, almost doesn't matter. It will all be open source. We're seeing now densities, power densities in racks that are going from an average of 5 kilowatts an hour, 5 kilowatts a rack, to 50 kilowatts a rack and above as being a real possibility. Silicon photonics is going to change the nature of how networking is done. So there's innovation in virtually every single aspect of the data center, and most of it is aiming us towards the time when it is truly the software-defined, data-driven, autonomous data center. Well, Taimour, I'm not sure I've earned the right to talk about much of anything. I've been following technology since roughly 1980 as what I call an increasingly literate amateur, as a publisher, as a journalist, as a conference provider, as a researcher. I look at trends over the long term. I'm not sure I've been particularly prescient about some of the trends in the past, but and I'm not sure that's really important. I think what's really important is that I feel I have a sense of what the technology sets are that are driving the digital transformation, the digital enterprise, and that we're at the stage where there need to be more voices that are trying to give this a big picture look. I said earlier that if Facebook were a country, it'd now be the largest country on the planet with 144 billion users. What's interesting to note is 1.2 billion of those users are using Facebook on their mobile devices. So when you take things like the IoT and mobility and all of those things together, what do they mean, and what does it mean to the infrastructure that supports it, and the data center? I think that's where I have a kind of meta view, a literate view of how that world works.